Welcome to Care Talk, a feature brought to you by the Microcare Center, and I'm your host, Georgia Johnson Grant. In this episode of Care Talk, I'm being joined by Mrs. Nicola Barnshaw, who is the founder of Banyan Educational Services, which is based in Ottawa, Canada. Nicola is a trained special educator, a certified baritone tutor, and she's also a dyslexia screener. Having successfully navigated her own children through to post-secondary education, Nicola's work focuses on supporting families of children with special learning needs through tutoring, dyslexia screening, and educational consulting. Nicola, we are happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start off on a bit of a personal note. So I just referenced your children who have special learning needs. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
So my daughter, Rebecca, she is dyslexic on the severe side of things, and navigating through school with her is extremely difficult. In a nutshell, we stumbled on the Barton Reading and Spelling program. I did the research and got myself trained in that. And she went through the program. Today, she graduated high school as an Ontario scholar. So children that must achieve 85 and over to do that, and she did. She got into the university of her choice, University of Guelph, and studied biochemistry. She graduated at the top of her class and immediately got into a master's program at University of McMaster, but she's now finished and again got top honors. And that's the little nutshell of Rebecca. Anthony is a bit more complicated because of the autism diagnosis. So the two of them, with the dyslexia and autism, it was a little tricky to navigate. In a nutshell now, for him, we did a lot of behavioral work, nutrition work, and of course, Barton Reading and Spelling program. And today, he was also an Ontario scholar, so 85 and above in high school, his high school average. And he is currently studying computers at Carleton University. So he's doing computers in computer science game development, and is an avid cook. He loves to bake. Excellent at baking.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So let's touch a little bit on autism. All right. So we know autism continues to increase prevalence. According to the World Health Organization, autism affects 1 in every 100 children, which is really alarming when you really look at the statistics. Now, when we think about autism, could you briefly tell us a little bit about what autism is?
So as far as the whole spectrum, it is a spectrum of disorders that you can have, autism spectrum disorder, and it comes in varying degrees. With my experience, because I'm not an autism specialist, my experience is based on my son. And luckily for me, he was verbal. So you can have the verbal and nonverbal side of autism. And he was able to articulate his feelings and what he was going through when he had certain episodes. And I'm going to kind of walk you through how all of this progressed from what we saw when he was a baby, and then as he was approaching school age, and what we did to help with both sides of it, the autism and as well as the dyslexia. So in the very beginning, we noticed him doing things with his hands like this when he was a little baby. When he wanted something, not much eye contact, and always had this surprised look on his face, like a fearful look on his face. And to us, we're like, oh yeah, Anthony's just looking a little, that's how he is. I didn't know at that time that he was stimming. And that's something that he did. He walked on his tippy toes. when he was learning to walk. And he had an unusual way of crawling. Didn't like to play with other kids. He wanted his own stuff. So all of those are little warning signs that kept going on. I'm now moving into school. That was where things got quite complicated and very tricky for him. Part of it is because he couldn't tolerate being in a classroom. It's sensory overload, and that's something you see in common with children on the autism spectrum. It is complete sensory overload. They cannot manage all the sights, sounds, and movement going around in the classroom. So that's why you tend to see these kids throwing tantrums, and then they will stim. It's not that they're trying to misbehave. This is how they're coping with what my son described as, it feels like electric shocks going through his body and it's physically painful. So that realization, and I'm so happy that he was able to articulate that to me, forced us to understand how difficult it was for him to just do day-to-day things. And we had to find a way to alleviate that. So now think he is 21 years old. So we're pushing back a decade and a half now. There wasn't that much out there. We had all this anecdotal evidence of what helped, what caused. I said that vaccines caused autism. Don't vaccinate your children. And I go to primary research, so I read it, and it didn't make sense. Autism is not caused by a vaccination, in my view, and that has been disproven. So I wanted to know how. It's genetic. He is autistic. He's on autism spectrum. It is what it is. We need to now work to make him the best person he can be with what we have. And I saw evidence in the nutrition side that it helped. And I saw evidence in the behavioral side. So we had a behavioral specialist, and also dealing on the psychological side. So all those three things combined, not just one thing, helped bring him out and helped him respond to things. So now on the nutrition, we can talk about that a little bit later, but that was something that I will have to say to people, it takes time. It does not get rid of autism. What it does, it calms them down. It calms their nervous system down. It allows them to be more receptive to learning and behavioral, learning academically and learning behaviors that we would normally have as a neurotypical person. So now walking into the behavioral part, we actually had a behavioral expert come in and tell us how we had to modify what we did. And part of that was keeping a schedule for him. Everything was routine. So the consistency, the daily routine, we wake up at the same time, you're going to do this, and then allow a space where there's going to be a variation, because these kids get stuck in a thought and they tend to have difficulty moving, for example, in the classroom setting, moving from one subject to another. Some of them will have to finish what they're doing, and that will cause a whole meltdown if you have to get them to move immediately. So as a behavioral exercise for him, we set aside one day a week where in this space of time, we would do something completely different. Something new was introduced. And what he knew was, he knew it was coming. He knew he may like it or may not. And he knew it would end. And that knowledge and that consistency in routine helped him to manage his behaviors and the stress that comes from something new.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.